of the University of Ilorin, who is joining us from Ilorin, and Dr. Shitu, joining us from University of Northampton in the UK. And I can see, yeah, they are already around. One of them is waving. Okay, I welcome you all, and then I welcome our audience who have linked in, primarily those who were with us 2 days ago and are also here today. Today's webinar is still on the same topic as we discussed 2 days ago: indigenous ornamentation in contemporary architecture. On Tuesday, that was 2 days ago, architect Jagede gave us a lead presentation on this topic. So today we have a panel of 3 seasoned academics and researchers to discuss specific aspects of the topic. First to speak will be Dr. Teriba. He will speak for between 15 and 20 minutes. Then Professor Ojuade will be the next speaker. He will speak for another 15 to 20 minutes. And finally, Dr. Shitu will speak for 15 to 20 minutes. But then we have exhausted 1 hour. Now we have time to get comments from the audience, and then to get questions from the audience that the 3 presenters will respond to. Without taking so much of a time, I now invite Dr. Teriba to make his presentation.
Thank you very much, Professor Igwe. It's such a joy to be in your midst. My affiliation with UNILAG goes back to 1982, believe it or not. I grew up on the campus, and so this is a pure pleasure and joy to be presenting this material. And I'm going to raise a series of questions to foster a debate and a discussion. So I look forward to questions, comments, and what have you, and to listening to my fellow panelists. Without much further ado, I will begin with the presentation as I share my screen. So the topic today is, for me anyway, is architecture, design culture, and society. Usually the background picture that I showed you before putting this on is something that I'll refer to in my presentation. And I'm going to do 2 things today in my 15 minutes or more. I'm going to put on 2 hats. One hat is the hat of an architectural historian, and the other hat is the hat of the architect. So in other words, I'm going to be descriptive, acting as an architectural historian in the first part of my presentation, and then I'll be prescriptive towards the end, making recommendations, raising questions about how architects and other stakeholders can move the discussion about indigenous ornamentation in contemporary architecture forward. So on to the description and my role as an architectural historian. I think we need to grapple with the word architecture in this discussion. And so, what is architecture? I would argue that a lot of our discussions throughout this Zoom series, as we've heard different speakers, is that we're asking a fundamental question. We're asking what architecture is. What is the role of architecture today? And I think it bears witness to one's presence in the world. This clamor by architect Jagede and others for ornamentation, to tell a story. If I were to distill that into one sentence, I think we're trying to bear witness to our presence. By making ornaments, by raising the question of ornaments, we're trying to bear, witness to ourselves, to where we belong in this world. Okay. So the next thing this leads me to the essay by Martin, a German philosopher, that was published in 1951, Building, Dwelling, and Thinking. And in that essay, he talked about how building is a kind of dwelling and building is a kind of thinking. That building is not just structure alone, but building, in other words, is announcing one's presence in the world. And I think that as we think about ornamentation in a Nigerian context, we have to look at other essays, and we have to look at people who have dwelt with this idea of building as dwelling in one space, as thinking about oneself, dwelling, in the present context. And so therefore, I want to put forward the idea that architecture then is more than structure. It is not limited to structure. It is poetic in a sense. It is a record of one's existence. Let me repeat that again. Architecture then is more than structure. It is poetic, a record of one's existence. And that actually leads me to the idea of regionalism, because I want to say that over all of our conversations, over all of the presentations that have taken place, whether it's Professor Hughes and all the other eminent presenters who have presented thus far in this series, is the idea of regionalism in architecture. In other words, creating an architecture that is regional, that is local to one space. And there's a lot of literature, so as an historian, I want to remind us that this idea of regionalism, this idea of dwelling is not new, that different architects, different theoreticians in different places around the world in different years have thought about regionalism. And in the 1970s, regionalism was raised again. There was an essay by an Englishman, Kenneth Frampton, called Critical Regionalism. As a way that different architects responded to this idea that architecture should be local, that it should look like it belongs. And so I want to give an overview of that, very quick overview of the history of the deployment of regionalism. Now, regionalism has not only been used in an architectural context, it's been used in literature as well. And for instance, in literature, American, and I'll come to this person in a moment, but let me say in the case of literature right here, there was a movement called, American literary regionalism. And the idea was that novels were supposed to be created to evoke the local setting where they were, made, that the setting, the locale was particularly important. And so writers emphasized dialects, they emphasized language, local languages, local customs, the local landscape as a way to produce literature that was regional. Now, in the case of architecture, this person right here, Louis Mumford, his home is actually very close to where I reside right here, but he was a well-known historian, philosopher, also a literary critic, and he wrote in 1907 an essay right here that you see right here called Bay Region Style of Architecture. And he cited this building right here was just one example of a building in San Francisco in the United States that evoked a San Francisco style. Therefore, this was a sort of reaction to, I will show, that is national style of architecture. The international style of architecture comes under many definitions. One of them is this idea that architecture is devoid of ornament. It is rational, it is functional. And there in the early parts of the 20th century, there arose this mindset that architecture had to just showcase its structure alone, that ornament was not necessary. Ornament was superfluous. And, Philip Johnson curated right here. He was not only an architect, you might remember him from the Glass House, but he was also a curator, and he actually curated an exhibition, very important exhibition in the United States called International Style. And that's where the name International Style came up. And of course, he was impacted by the very influential essay. Architect Jegede made a reference to it in his presentation on Tuesday, Ornament and Crime, that was written in 1908. This is Adolf Loos right here. This is Philip Johnson right here. So one initial question I want to raise is that I wonder, with all this talk about ornamentation, we live in a society where we depend on delivering architectural projects on time. We have a budget, we have a time frame. Do we really have the patience to deploy ornament in our buildings, as we know that ornament takes time? So this is a question. I'm just throwing this as a question for debate that we can debate about. Obviously, Demerson Nwoko, the spirit, Demerson Nwoko, he's still with us. Demerson Nwoko has been raised as a very good example of an architect who has thought deeply about ornament and architecture. And I want to push this a little bit further, because one of the wonderful things about has done, he would test out certain things as a sculptor, as an artist, as well as an architect. In his studio, he would test out certain details, like window details, details of columns. He would test them out in his studio. He would make them before he would actually see them being erected in his architecture. And so I want to ask, I wonder, even before I get to this, but I want to raise this, that are we as architects, are we doing that kind of experimentation in our studios? Are our studios, in other words, places where we draw alone, or are we making experiments? Are we building, are we testing windows that we can design with ornamentation? Are we making life-scale models of that before we actually finalize our drawings in the studio? So that's another question I want to raise. Are we doing that? Just moving ahead, Professor Adejumo, early on in this series, talked about cultural forms, raising Yoruba cultural ideas, and whatnot. And he made a case for dissociating, cultural forms, Yoruba cultural forms from, the meaning, whether the religious meaning or what have you. And so this is a very, I want to raise this again because this is a very important question. Can we do this? Can we actually detach the meanings of certain iconography, put up some signs, it's Tuesday presentation. Can we really do that, or are those things intricately intertwined? This is a question that I think we need to raise as well. Somehow, it's just a question that we need to raise at the very least. That, in other words, can forms just act without the meaning? Can they operate? Forms in architecture operate without the meaning. This is a legitimate. And this leads me actually to this. I would make a recommendation that in future iterations of this conference and of this web series, we need to bring artists to the table. We need to bring artisans. They need to be part of this conversation. As wonderful as this conference has been, I think what is lacking, if I'm humble to say so, is that, artisans, artists, sculptors should be a part of this conversation. This shouldn't be limited to architects alone. And so I've dealt with architecture. Let me just move on to the second part of my title, design culture, because that's my last point has a direct bearing on this. I think that our design culture must change. And just to go back to Demasun Nwoko, in some interviews I've seen online, he was a little bit skeptical about the drafting process in architectural design because drawing, as wonderful as drafting and drawing is, outside of making models in studio, architects don't necessarily build per se. They don't make windows. They don't make details. And one of the hallmarks of Demasun Nwoko was that he would make the windows. He would make the details that were incorporated into his design. So why don't we design our studios in such a way that there is a making component in our studios, not only in the universities, but in architectural firms as well? Why are we not doing that? So in other words, it just follows up. It's the way we design today, the right strategy, if we want an architectural place that witnesses to who we are. Are we too removed from the construction site, just drawing in our studios? Do we have laboratories in our studios where we invent building materials, elements of buildings, and then test them on the site? Demasun Nwoko did that in his career. He was a bit skeptical about drawing. I don't have much time, but let me just move on. One thing I want to throw out there, why not interview Demasun Nwoko about his approach to architectural design, where he merges craft and design together? Artists and craftsmen need to be part of future conferences on ornament and architecture. And I want to quickly introduce a person, Person Olawe of Ise, wonderful, remarkable sculptor who, and he did the thing that is at my background that you saw in the opening, and that was a door panel. You see the door panel right here. He was commissioned by builders to do sculpted columns. This is not just a sculpture, but this is a sculpted column right here that supported a roof, and he did door panels here. You know, why don't we interview people? I mean, he has passed on now, but people, why don't we go to villages, go to these places where these people are? Why don't they sit at the table with us as architects? In the initial, when we're coming up with the concepts, don't bring them in at the end to design a gate or something. Involve them in the beginning of the when you're coming up with your conceptual designs. And this is the door panel that I'm talking about. It's located in the British Museum. It was done in 1910 and 1914. I can say more about this, but I want to keep to time. The only thing I will say is that architect Jagede made a comment about telling our stories through architecture. I want to call your attention to this right here. Notice the dates. This was done in 1910 to 1914, the era of colonization. You see a colonial figure right here. And so Olawe of Ise he's telling the story of colonization through this door panel. And that is the what are the stories we need to tell today in 21st century Nigeria? What are the stories? How can we tell those stories through our architecture, through our ornaments? Society. So again, what's the role does society have to play in all of this? Because in many ways, this architecture that we're thinking about is really a narrative of society, not a society in the 19th century, not the society when Olawe of Ise, God rest his soul, was living and did incredible work. But what is our society today? And I would again argue that in our studios, we need to have in-house ornamental experimentation in the guise of Olawe of Ise. We need to test new materials. Architects, are we designing, again, and this is just interesting because I think that oftentimes we rely on standards, whether it's by certain bodies in Nigeria, Standard Organization of Nigeria. We rely on standards of windows, details, and what have you. We as architects should be inventing details, inventing materials. What stops us from inventing materials as well? And in terms of society, I think we can do this small scale. There was a wonderful question in Tuesday's presentation about the cost of ornamentation. And my response would be, I know Dr. Shitu will also comment on this as well, but I want to say that why don't we start small in terms of small scale cottage operations? Demasin Woko produces his things in-house. So why don't we start small? In order to curb cost and to make it affordable? That would be one thing. And we can, if we have pockets of this in different parts of the country, I think we can move forward. We don't have to think at a macro level. We can think about experimentation on a micro level. And I just want to just bring up this idea of the design charrettes. We know of the design charrette as a collaborative enterprise as a way of generating design solutions. Why don't we bring artisans and artists in on the design charrettes? So the design charrette should not only be about architects and people in the community, but bring the artists as well to so we can really invent a new kind of design process. And this has been done in the 19th century. This was done by William Morris, who was a Renaissance man of some sort. He designed wallpapers, textiles. He produced wonderful books. But he collaborated, this is William Morris right here. He collaborated with an architect, Philip Webb, to design. He co-designed this building where he created furniture, even carpets and what have you. So again, there are precedents for this kind of collaborative design that we should. So I think that in order to push this idea that this conference is raising about ornamentation in the local context, we do need to be more collaborative. Thank you very much.
Okay. I'd like to thank Dr. Tariba for this brilliant presentation. And at the end, comments will be made and questions will be asked. We will now invite Professor Ojwade to make his presentation. Professor Ojwade.
Can you hear me, sir?
Yes.
Yes, we are hearing you.
All right, thank you so much. Good afternoon, sir. And good afternoon, everyone. Let me start by saying I'm glad to be part of this development and need to thank the organizers sincerely for the privilege of being part of this discourse. Initially, when architect Bode Jegede invited me, I asked myself, I was wondering, what will the performance do within the scholars or experts in the area of architecture? Then I sat back and I said, probably we're not getting the discourse well. And I said, performance is all about life. And what they are doing in architecture is part and parcel of what we do in the realm of performance. So I said, well, this is like bridging the gap between town and gown. So I think I'm on course. Now, I'm going to show a video for everyone to see for like 1-2 minutes so that it can form the basis of my discussion. Sorry.
Send a message. Just skip the video and continue. Skip the video and continue. It's only just like 2 minutes. So it's skip it. Something over myself.
Sorry, I have to stop that video. But the most important thing that I'm trying to bring out here is the relationship between theater and architecture. Here, what we do in performing arts, we believe performance of arts, namely music, dance, and drama. Drama being dialogue. And at the same time, all these three areas, they rest heavily on other elements of the arts, which architecture is represented fully. We call it scenic design or technical theater, where we have makeup, we have designs, we have drawings, all sorts, embedded in the theater. Now, what I have done today is to break down, the presentation into slides, like 21 slides, and with the video clips, I'll move on to the definitions of terms, ornamentation. I will speak briefly about the Yoruba culture, look at the interplay between ornamentation and performance, then cite some examples, practical examples, because what we do in theater is more practical. Although we do theory, but we use theory as a form of research, to bring it on stage live. Then I'll talk about the discoveries, then conclude. Now, how interrelated is the art of performance and the field of architecture? This is a serious question. And we believe that theater is life, and life is theatrical. In our world, performance takes on any field of human endeavor to further probe, ascertain, explain, interrogate, question, instruct, preserve, or prove interdependence of one field on another. Architect Bodi Jegede mentioned this in his presentation, that a form of these are being preserved with all the drawings, all the ornamentation, that we see on some of our buildings. Why we use the medium of theater as the communication tool to illustrate real life on stage. Actors are made to understudy characters and their profession for originalities of purpose. Now, if we want someone to play the role of a medical doctor or an architect, what we do for originality, we will have to go and understudy that particular person, or else some of the nuances will be taken away. So indigenous ornamentation in contemporary architecture is the broad thing that we're discussing here, but I want to look at the indigenous ornamentation in Yoruba culture and performance worldview. Now, indigenous communication is the local communication that is unique to a given culture of society, which existed before the arrival of modern mass media. This indigenous communication system still exists today, despite changes brought by technology. Indigenous communication, according to Wang and Dizanyok, is a credible and acceptable source of information among the rural populace. In fact, my worry is that probably part of the reason why we believe architecture is more of a profession that belongs to a few is the movement from rural to urban. Because if, I'm still going to get there, if we look at the pre-colonial period, you know, some of these things were done effortlessly. They do it as, you know, a form of profession. They do it with joy. But because we are now in the modern world, it's becoming less attractive to a lot of people in the local environment. Now, Akinyele gave examples of folk media as puppet show, folk drama, storytelling, interpersonal communication, village meetings, community tea houses, open market conversation, and so on. It wouldn't be out of place to state it expressly that in architectural designs are also a part of indigenous communication, as these designs vary from one ethnic group to another. Notably, indigenous communication channel or oral media refers to any form of endogenous communication system, which by virtue of its origin from the integration into specific culture, serves as a medium to convey messages in a way and manner that requires the utilization of values, symbols, institutions, and ethos of the host culture through its unique qualities and attributes. If we look at some of the ornaments, when we take, for instance, in private apartment buildings, some of these ornaments probably being hung on the wall as a status symbol, they communicate a particular message that once you see it, you will know there's something about this, the owner of this house. Take, for instance, a farmer or a hunter who proudly displays the leopard skin of a lion. We will know that probably this man must have wrestled or killed a lion, you know, in previous life. So the uniqueness of African means of communication is embedded in their originality, creativity, tradition, and culture of the people. This makes them highly effective and enduring in dissemination of information personally, interpersonally, and through group communications. Despite the dominant nature of mass culture and cultural imperialism, oral media has continued to endure. This might perhaps have been further motivated by nationalistic movements of negritude, Pan-Africanism, and African personality as documented by Mazuri and Mazuri. Commendably, oral media has been sustained through its originality and resilience in the face of neo-colonialism and imperialism. Facts, artworks, paintings, stories are among other cultural architecture that reflect in the palaces, shrines, and African cities, towns, and villages. Uniquely, oral media grants immediate feedback, which makes communication conducted by Botswizel attest to this fact, that research has shown that 65% of all social meaning in face-to-face communication is conveyed through non-verbal stimuli, while verbal stimuli account for no more than 35%. This is visible in what makes a king's palace distinct to stand out from an ordinary resident of a village. While ornaments such as crown or the horse tail, which Yoruba calls irukere, among other regal paraphernalia, would be made out of mud or brass to beautify a king's palace, and it will be absent from an ordinary man's house. On seeing that, one gets the message immediately that this place is a palace. Similarly, the irons that I showed at the beginning, these are drummers. If you look at the drums, it's not just drumming for drumming sake. It wasn't just dancing for dancing sake, because I had to pause it because there was the dance aspect there. But if you look at the drums, after constructing the drums, they came up with an idea that how do we put ornamentations to beautify the drums? That, forget about the coloring, the blue color, that the drums, the wooden material was painted. The strap alone, not just ordinary strap, it was made of ornaments, designs, colorful designs that will add aesthetics to the entire performance. They are the custodian of the drums, while various types of drums such as bata, gangan, dudun, wouldn't be surprising to see that Anya has drums hung all around it. It goes beyond aesthetics. It also has its place in communication. I think I listened to one of the presenters talking about metaphor in language. These drummers, in fact, they are like reservoir of language. They communicate a lot through the instrument. The language that they cannot speak audibly, they use the medium of the drums to communicate. Broadly speaking, we're trying to define what ornamentation looks like. Dr. Teriba mentioned, made some clarification, to define ornamentation. I'm not going to go deep into that, but I just want to mention few that ornamentation connotes the decoration for the purpose of enhancing aesthetic appeal of buildings or any object in context. If peradventure we get to the palace of our kings in the southwestern part of Nigeria, immediately you get to the gate, when you see the decoration, the ornamentation, you will know that, oh, this is beautiful. But if you get close to some of those designs, they will give you historical background of that particular kingdom. They tell stories, they have, all sorts of important history, converged in the drawings. Studies affirm ornamentation as a creative work of art in the decorative art. The context of ornament and ornamentation is obviously extremely broad, constrained only by the limits of human imagination. An ornament, as earlier stated, is a decorative device, not essential to a structure in context, but often necessary to emphasize or diminish the impact of structural elements, sometimes with iconographic roles. Ornamentation from another perspective could be iconographically symbolic to represent a corporate logo, while it could also be the application of ornaments on objects and people for overall beautiful outlook. Most cultures of the world have evolved their own repertoire of architectural ornaments. That was why I was really happy the way architect Bode Jegede, he took a global perspective of ornamentation. He wasn't even restraining himself despite the fact that we're talking about the ornamentation in Yoruba culture here, but he looked at some other cultures of the world. The decorative art. The decorative art is traditionally a term for design and manufacture of traditional objects. It is often categorized in opposition to the fine arts, namely painting, drawing, photography, and large-scale sculpture, which generally have no function other than to be glimpsed. In addition, the decorative arts represent a traditional term for a number of arts and crafts. This includes the ceramic art. It's also known as pottery, furniture, woodwork, wood carvings, jewelry, and metal works as produced by goldsmiths, and textile arts and other art stone, including petrol, the art rocks that are engraved in gems, ivory, and bone carving. Who are the Yorubas? The Yoruba people, who are they? I looked at some of the historical antecedents that the Yoruba people emerged from. But I just felt we should just look at it from the perspective of their culture. And I said from the oral culture of its distant past to its vibrant present and supported by its scholarly discourse, Yoruba cosmology is shrouded in a set of narratives and cultural practices that attempt to explain the causes and nature of events surrounding their existence and their spiritual universe. Oral history recorded under the Oyo Empire derives the Yoruba as an ethnic group from the population of the older kingdom of Ile-Ife. The Yoruba constitutes about 88 million people within Nigeria and over 120 million worldwide. The vast majority of this population is from Nigeria, where the Yoruba make up 24% of the country's population, making them one of the largest ethnic groups in Africa. But if you look around the world, the globe now, the Yoruba people, they have settled down in other countries. If you get to Brazil, you have the Yoruba people there. We have them in Cuba. We have, even in America, the United States of America, they have a kingdom there. They have moved around, around the globe. Yoruba culture consists of folk cultural philosophy, autonomous religion, and folktales. They are embodied in Ife divination, known as tripartite Book of Enlightenment or Book of Knowledge in Yoruba land and in diaspora. Other components of the Book of Knowledge or the Book of Enlightenment are psychology, sociology, mathematics, cosmology, and other areas of human interest. The Yoruba cultural thought is a witness of two epochs. The first epoch is an epoch-making history in mythology and cosmology, while the second epoch is the epoch of metaphysical discourses. The uniqueness of Yoruba thought is that it is mainly narrative in form, explaining and pointing to the knowledge of the causes and nature of things affecting corporeal and spiritual universe and its wellness. That's why we see the babalawos, before they do anything, they will have to divine, to see, to take a gaze into the future and see what are the things that they can do to bring back a wellness of the society. Now, this is where architecture concerns the art of performance, and it is more of practical. I tagged it the interplay, ornamentations in performance. Here in Yoruba parlance, the saying that awala ni asha, awala lasa, awala ni ishe, that is, we are the owner, the custodian of our culture, completely tells the story of activities involving performances that goes on in our different environments, particularly in the palaces of our traditional rulers. If we get to the palace of Alaafin Oyo today, you will see retinue of drummers, retinue of people that will be making oral renditions. And if a visitor enters the palace, they don't have to go and meet the king before he knows that there is somebody who is the stranger. Because the drummers, the singers, the retinue of people, they would have alerted him through their communicating tools, drumming, probably oral rendition, he would have gotten, the message. Then in performance, which is an offshoot of the theory and practice in theater, are made possible with efforts of different activities weaved together as a whole. In achieving such a thing, characters' roles with the support of other elements of the theater involving ornamentations bring out the hidden aesthetics. For instance, if we take a cursory look at our existence through the pre-colonial experiences, the colonial era, and the post-colonial activities in terms of cultural and performance events, it will bring back the memories of the past and revealing. Now, some of the practical experiences. that I cited here. The first one is the construction of stages for performance. This is where I believe there is a kind of a gap between the field of architecture and the field of performance. Because in performance realm, whenever we have the performance, the theater, we believe, thrives on either the construction of a round theater, or we have a proscenium act stage, or a designated place. Whichever one we are picking out of the three, there has to be a construction. The technical crew will have to construct a set. And of course, not just constructing it, they will have to beautify the stage. This is where ornamentation plays lead role here. And I believe meeting of the minds of architects and the professional artists too will give us probably another form of practical events, because they are experts. They know what to put on stage, rather than the way we just study other professions and just represent them in real life. Architect Jegede mentioned the national, no, I think one of the presenters mentioned the National Art Theatre at Igamu, Lagos. The National Art Theatre, had a very big hall with a adjoining studio theatre. And here, I just represented the stage with two pictures here. The first one here is the proscenium act theater that we have a performance on set, and the other one is plain nobody except the king crown that was the image of the king crown that was drawn on the wall there with the horse tails. The second one is House of Individuals. That is the residential buildings. It serves as a reflection of the status in terms of profession, cadre, age, or whatever within that society. Here, people display in their sitting rooms or in a conspicuous place items reflecting their power, status, role being hung on the wall. And I picked the picture of Susan Wenger's house in Oshobo here, to represent residential building. If you look at the outside, these are ornamental works. And at a close look, we will see the representation of individual telling stories. There are some, hunters holding their dengon, while some holding, their walking stick, all sorts of things. It's not just decoration, but an historical one that can, tell history of existence of Yoruba people. The third one is the palaces of our traditional rulers. Being the custodian of our traditions, a lot of artifacts are preserved in their domains. A relevant example is the Ile Oodua at the Enwa Palace of the Ooni of Ife. If you get there, you will see all sorts of sculpture, drums, other significant items preserved, kept there. I used, the picture, the image of the Obalufon statue here and that of Odudua to represent, some. In the current Oni, in fact, he has turned that thing to like a mini museum, whereby as you are entering the palace, you'll be seeing so many of those things, being brought back, probably, I would say, in the contemporary way now. Here I showed pictures of, this is image of the entrance of Oba of Lagos Palace, and another one from the northern part of Nigeria, showing the ornamental works here. Now, the fourth one is the beauty of the people. The saying goes that we have ones, these are glaring, such a, through our dresses and body adornments in Yoruba land, we'll see all sorts of things like this hairdo. We can see, beautiful hairdos here and traditional marks, tribal marks. You can see, they call these abaja. And you can see another one from the extreme right here, showing all sorts of tribal marks. The next one is contemporary applications. Here, I met a young lady who, for reasons known to her by the name Afro Ornament, she has been operating that, despite the fact that she graduated from the University of Ibadan, she studied fisheries. And I asked her, why are you into? She said, no, we need to, project our image. We need to do this. And I was really, really taken aback. I just picked some of, the items, that she's marketing and selling, some of her ornaments. What interests me a lot is that she adapted the earring rather than the contemporary one, used some of the ornaments to make earring. You can see the one with a cowrie, rather than using cowrie for something, she now adapted it to make it as earring. And this is another one, map of Africa, and bedside light. Now, the discovery, there are three basic and fairly distinct categories that, ornamentation in architecture has been defined by Encyclopedia Britannica. That we have mimetic or imitative ornamentation, we have applied ornamentation, and organic ornamentation. The mimetic or imitative ornamentation are the forms of which have certain definite meanings or symbolic significance. They are reproduced shapes and qualities familiar from past usage in new materials using new technology. While the applied ornamentation are the ornamentation that only adds beauty to structure. It is extrinsic to it. It is merely applied decoration, lacking either symbolic meaning or reference to the structure on which it is placed. While the last one is organic ornamentation. In architecture, it is embedded and considered originally along with the structure, thereby serving in a dual purpose of functionality and embellishment. Yes, sir.
Yeah. We are running out of time.
All right, sir.
We are running out of time.
All right. In conclusion, we discovered that the academic and non-academic communities are becoming more and more enlightened in Yoruba cultures across the globe. And my main recommendation that I will go straight to is that beyond the extension, because I try to recommend here that architectural designs or architects should look beyond the exterior. They should look interior. They should come close to the theater to come and assist the performers in some areas. And I said beyond the attention of architects on exterior and interior of theater. Collaborative efforts should be geared towards research and documentation. Also, curriculum development and more involvement of the architects in the construction of buildings, even private buildings. I think it will be a welcome idea, and it will assist the nation. Importantly, let us organize more educative discourse as this, at least in form of lectures, seminars, workshops, which will attract will-be professionals in the near future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Uduade. I personally have enjoyed your discussion. It's very incisive and well researched. I want to thank you very much. At the end of the presentations, questions will be asked and comments will be made. You might take some of them as they come. We will now invite Dr. Shitu from United Kingdom to make his presentation. You have 15 minutes.
Okay. Yeah. So, good afternoon, everyone. It's a privilege to be invited to this seminar. I thank the organizers very much. I'm not going to take more. Hello, are you hearing me?
Yes.
Okay,
Go on.
good. Okay. So, the title of my presentation is The Past Informing the Future, Ornamentation in Modern Context. As the youngest in the family and with name starting with T and surname starting with S, I'm used to doing everything last. Throughout university, I'm always presenting last. So I make it, but trust me, I use it to my advantage. And that's exactly what I'm doing today. The past presenters have talked about extensively about ornamentation, the meaning, and so on and so forth. So I will just round up, just summarize it, and go straight to my story, to my experience in modern context. So first and foremost, I want us to look at what ornamentation is. What is the simple definition of ornamentation? The Oxford Dictionary says that it's an element added to something to enhance its appearance. As an architect, I debunk that. Ornamentation is not just enhancing appearance of something. If you look at this ornamentation, is a Yoruba ornamentation on a building. It does more than just enhancing the physical appearance. What does it do? It's a structural element. So it shows that ornamentation can be both decorative, but at the same time, structural element. And as we can see in this slide, there are various examples around the world that really reflect that. I'm not going to talk about it too, but the last one, the mosques in Jannah, as you can see, the protruding elements, initially they serve as scaffolding, which at the end of the day, it was left there and it became part of the ornamentation in the building. That's another aspect. And this other example, we can see various forms of ornamentation around the world. But what does it do? In the Bele, Kasena, and the Asante and the rest, first and foremost, what it does is that, yes, it enhances the physical appearance, but the real origin of it is that they have the understanding that rendering is sacrificial. So that means after sometimes, maybe yearly or biannually, it has to be replaced. So to reduce this maintenance, they devise means of adding value, making the ornamentation stronger. So I'm making the rendering stronger. But it has to be beautiful. And that's how this various form of ornamentation comes. And it adds value, it adds strength, apart from adding beauty to the surface. Again, another example of the Yoruba architecture. I've already mentioned all these structural aspects. But more importantly, what it does is that it speaks meaning. Dr. Chariba has already spoken much about that. And then on Monday, Architect has spoken about that. So I'm not going to go too much about it. But what I want us to look at is this. If you look at this, on one side is a column, and on the other side is door panels. These door panels were so beautiful that when the invaders came, they dismantled it and sold it out as piece of art, not architecture. In the, another example I pick is the house architecture, which what we are seeing in now is modern version of the traditional type. So most of the rendering is done with cement on earthwork. Again, here it has different meaning. Every household do their own ornamentation differently. Some is just abstract relief. Some showing their occupation. Some even celebrating buying bicycles. Some putting dates. Some even putting their political affiliates. NEPU, NCNC, and most recent one, PRP and NPN and so on and so forth. Everything there on it. So that on a nutshell, this is few examples of ornamentation that I picked. So now my story. I was privileged to, at early stage of my career, to get a commission that really changed my orientation of architecture and that really defined my career up to this day. And it is a project which it was during the construction that even the name of the project came into being. The brief was that we should design a building that reflects Africa. And if there's anything I hate, is somebody to refer Africa as a country or as a particular culture. So that was the first challenge I have with the clients to say, look, Africa is not a country. It's not one culture. It's a continent on its own. But again, the client said, yes, I know, but I want something that will challenge African architects to think more, to be proud of their culture. And so that's how we started. We came with different concepts and different ideas. And at the end of the day, we agree, we disagree, and at the end of the day, we look for ways that it will not work. So, by the way, the project started in 1995, and the design alone took 2 years before we went to site in 1997. At the end of the day, this is to the left of the screen. To our left is the site layout. In the middle, there is an existing building there. The initial brief was that this will go, the existing building will go, which I strongly challenge to say, look, why can't we design around it? Came up with the concept, and then at the end of the day, the client did not buy the idea. And so the clients won. So we made a design. At the back, the initial design, there is a cycle. There is a circular building at the back. And then we have 4 octagonal shaped classrooms with a link in between, and then the rectangular block in the front. So we started work, which I wasn't happy with the concept. We started work. As you can see, the picture at the top, the gentleman sitting down there looking so miserable is me. And to be honest with you, that was my mood all through when the project started. This is the day we moved to the site. And as at that time, the agreement is that the building at the back would be demolished. It's a very beautiful colonial building, which, based on my philosophy at that time, it should be preserved for prosperity. And then those trees, you see, my initial design was that the tree that is built will be preserved, but here am I powerless. The client has all the power to do that. So By the way, the picture was taken by my boss. He's late now. And he said something. He said, look, he took the photograph and then a few days later, I gave it to me. He said, preserve the picture because when you are telling the story of this building, if you show them, people will realize that it wasn't that easy. There are so many compromises you made. You were not happy, but at the end of the day, you respected the client, which is true. So we started a project, even though we mobilized to the site, but honestly, we didn't have any finished drawing at all. And as I'm speaking today, there was never any as-built drawing because we were modifying the drawings as we go ahead. So what do we do first with this great challenge? First of all, I have to undergo extensive, study to understand, even though then I think I know more about Nigerian traditional architecture and African traditional architecture, but now I'm challenged. So I have to go back and start learning, reading, and do other stuff. And again, I have to look at what is the current situation with Nigerian traditional architecture, for example. What are the problems? So I have to visit. First of all, I started in Zaria, which is very close to Kaduna, where the project is, to look at buildings that were still existing at that time. What are the problems? What are the challenges? And without saying anything, the first two pictures, you can see the problems. You can see some elements of patching with cementitious render, which is not compatible to the original material. And at the end of the day, I have to find a common ground. How do we move from tradition to modern, but at the same time respecting the tradition? So another thing I did was to look at contemporary buildings. What are these problems? What can we learn from contemporary buildings? And then also look at even some existing buildings that try to mimic traditional buildings. One of this building, the one with arches, is called German Castle or something like that. It was built by an expatriate using the local stone around there to build a castle. And then the last one image here is a pottery very close to Kaduna. Just to learn how, the science of art, because the materials we wanted to use is art, traditional material. And the more I sit down to draw, to bring down my concept, the more challenges, the more thinking I have to do. And honestly, at a point, I want to give up. But one thing that changed me is not design, it's not anything, it's a write-up. And it's from the book that is known for everyone of us, the Introduction to Nigerian Traditional Architecture, the Mukoski. In the preface, he wrote this, and I will read it. He said, "They should not repeat ancient patterns nor copy them in any revivalist attempt. They should act as did the courageous designers of Italian Quattrocento, inspired by the old national achievement, yet fully aware of being in the service of their contemporaries. In the same way, the present Nigerian architects should fulfill their duties to the 20th century in Nigeria society, which is their own, accepting tradition as a starting point of their creative independent thinking. They should evolve in steel and concrete, glass, and aluminum, a modern school of architecture." I said, eureka, when I read this. And I said, look, in fact, it was like a freedom. I said, look, yes, I'm not going to limit myself with only traditional material. I will use traditional material in modern form, but I will incorporate modern materials in a traditional style. And that's what we came up with. So in terms of form, I explore different geometry, as you can see, octagon, rectangle, squares, and so on. And the materials was compressed earth bricks, adobe, timber, ceramic, steel, aluminum, glass, perspex, plastic, and so on and so forth. The ornamentation, because of, first of all, the client, because of religious belief, the wife is a Christian, the husband is a Muslim. So there is a conflict in terms of what kind of relief is acceptable or not. So we resolve that we're going to use abstract form. But more especially, we are going to have a landscape to be part of the ornamentation of the building. Why? Because we are going to use most of the materials that we're going to use are organic material, which with time, it will fade, it will decay, it will grow, it will change color. The same way, if we incorporate landscape, the landscape will grow. Seasonally, it will change color. So both the organic and inorganic will grow at the same time, decay at the same time, regenerate at the same time. So, and so we go. We mobilized to the site and started our construction. As you can see, the compressed earth bricks was molded on site, and almost everything was done on site. And then a new politics starts. Because the clients already have a crew that they normally use for their projects, they supply this, they supply that, and there we are. We want to do everything on site. And we are seen as, look, these people are blocked. You know what it means in Nigeria. And at a point, the project has to even stop. The planning authority side, we must produce structural drawing for it, for everything, because it has columns, it has beams, it has arches, it has domes, and we have to do some produce structural drawing. And also, I have to bring a structural engineer into the project, explain the project to the person, and believe me, almost everything I did in myself, the only thing he did is to put his seal. And that's how we submitted the structural drawings, which was fortunately approved. And throughout this project, it was a process of learning for every one of us. The artisans have to be trained on site. And you know what it means working with artisans in Nigeria. Over 200 artisans were involved, and not a single one was involved from start to finish. We quarrel sometimes. Some people voluntarily say, look, I cannot do it. Because a typical bricklayer in Nigeria doesn't understand why should every brick has to be straight. Because they are used to block that at the end of the day, they will correct their mistake with render. But in our own case, some of the bricks will be exposed, so everything has to be spot on. So it was very, very challenging for us. But at the end of the day, because I have a very good client that believe in us, my boss is an engineer, water engineering by background, but he gave me the tremendous support. Said that, look, at a point, he has to even, every day he will bring a film, I will watch a film just to inspire me to carry on with the project. So that's how we continue learning through the job. And along the way, we made mistakes, but because we have a client that is forgiving, everything went on smoothly. So you can see different, the projects at different stages. The one, that's media on the one with touch. That's the completed picture of the completed octagonal shaped classroom. And those are the different stages of construction. You can see. So after the main construction, it now comes to the ornamentation. And by the time we finish the shell of the construction, we have never agreed on how we are going to decorate the building. And so we have to sit down again. And the first scheme that I produced was totally rejected. I was accused that it looked like a shrine, which is unacceptable Islamically. And opposite the side is even a mosque, a private mosque for the client. So they cannot have a shrine opposite the mosque. So at the end of the day, I have to take inspiration from landscape to say, look, we are going to do a landscape, okay? Probably we'll just do some attractive form, and then we'll do some relief, some leaves in relief, and so on and so forth. And that's how we started. Initially, we thought, okay, we are going to paint, but we started experimenting. And at the end of the day, we used all sorts of materials, ceramics, mosaic, even mirrors, different form of cement. As you can see, we use colored cement, black, white cement, red cement, and so on and so forth. We use that. And the building were in phases. We started to the left, and the central part, the bottom picture, the central part was the last we did. As a matter of fact, we finished both wings. We don't even have this design for the central parts. And this design, we have to do series of models using, at a point, we cannot even use cardboard. We started using clay to do a model. And at the end of the day, if you ask me whose idea is this last one that we finally built, I would say nobody's idea. It's a combination of so many ideas to come up with this. So this answered the question of Dr. Teriva that a call that we have to collaborate, we have to change our design culture. It's something that, yes, I did about 25 years now. Yes, and it works. But I must say this, that it's not easy, it's not cheap at all. But I was fortunate to have a client that is willing to back this project. These are the fences. As you can see here, we started with Adobe. And after looking at the surrounding area, we have trees here, they are going to grow and everything. At the end of the day, we realized that the Adobe block would not work. So I have to remove the Adobe block. And that's how we came with the idea of using mosaic. We use cement render, we use mosaic, and we use relief on it. So through trial and error, we came up with this idea. And finally, these are some of the pictures of these pictures, I took these pictures in 2018 when I visited Nigeria. And I couldn't believe how everything, particularly the landscape, how everything has changed. And as you can see, even the earth decorations, they are still there. And these are the fears, oh, these are art decoration, they will not last, they are doing that, but they are still there. This is another picture. You can see the landscape, how the landscape has grown, has almost swallowed the main building. And that is the idea, to say that, look, I will never forget, she said, look, I want to create an African jungle where everything's grow, so that at least, she said, look, I want in 10 years, the building to be lost in the landscape. And that's what exactly happened. Yeah, there are some teething problems. Not everything goes well. The fountain inside the building is still there, but as you can see, the touch is long gone because not because they don't want to maintain it, but it's becoming extremely expensive to maintain. So they have to replace it with long span aluminium, and they use red, which I don't really didn't like. But apart from that, every other thing is working. Is there the way it was designed, the way it was decent, and it's well maintained. And today I asked someone to help me take a picture because I was convinced that maybe something must change between 2018 and now. I want to get a current picture. So I got these pictures today. The only picture, this picture was taken when it was still under construction. Any other picture there is new. You can see this sea of forest was taken from the opposite side. Because the picture that was taken exactly from this spot that I took when it was still under construction, you cannot even recognize it because everything is, the building is completely covered with the landscape. So this is the picture from the other side. So the only thing that you can recognize the project with is the fence, the little fence around there. And so this project is not the only project that we did. I would say ornamentation is very infectious. When it's difficult to start. People will talk about, it's very expensive, this and that, but once you start, you don't want to finish. When we started putting the decorations, that is when the client starts, oh, we can do this, we can do that. The first picture is a flower pot, which we constructed from the remnants, the bricks, the broken bricks on site. We constructed it, and then we pushed the remaining mosaic and then mirrors to the flower pots. This is a fountain. The fountain was existing in the main school, but it has to be ornamented now. This is a fence between the house and the school. The existing fence has to be demolished and has to be designed and constructed to match the new school. The first picture to my screen is the other part of the school, which we have to also make it match the new school. The second picture done maybe about 5-6 years ago. The client tried to get inspiration from what we did. You know what she told me? She said, I respect architects for what they did. She said, even though I was involved in the project, but I could not replicate exactly what you guys did. But at least, the reason why I put this picture is to say that, look, a small beginning can lead to a revolution. Look at it on ornamentation. Yes, it may not be to anybody's taste, but it's a statement to say that, look, I'm in love with this thing. And in everything I do, there must be some element of decoration in it. So to draw a conclusion, just as I said, ornamentation has a powerful pull. You cannot just resist it. It's beautiful. And as architects, we design buildings, we make buildings, but at the end of the day, buildings shape us. So just imagine if every building is ornamented, if every building is decorative, if every building have some element of beauty, maybe you and I, those beating we received for drawing on the walls, because as a child, we see it as a blank canvas. Maybe what we will have been doing then is to take a pen and paper and pencil and paper to try to mimic what we see on our buildings. Imagine if every event is inscribed on our doors, we will not make the mistake of the past. Imagine if Nigerian history, particularly our dark history, like the Civil War, is inscribed in every official building, will not make mistakes we made. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shitu. That is a brilliant presentation. Excellent research backed by your professional fieldwork on ornamentation. We appreciate you. Thank you very much. Now, we have a few minutes for the audience to make comments or ask questions. The floor is open. You can signify, so we give it, go ahead.
Question? Comment? Now, while we're waiting for questions and comment, I want to appreciate again the kind of presentations we had today. Right from Dr. Teriba and the pertinent questions he asked. Then we moved on in, you said something very specific, that's about experimental studios. Like in the case of Demas Nwoku. And I want to even get us the consciousness that even Le Corbusier worked the same way. So it's not something out of ordinary even for us architects to have experimental studios. Now, when Professor Jalil Ojuade now came in and began to talk about visual arts, you know, we need to have, we need to see that connection, that art itself are both visual and performing, and architecture is utilitarian. Now, I want to call on architect BC Olumide for your question, please. You can unmute the mic. BC Olumide. Can we have BC Olumide to ask, make a comment? Now, while waiting for her, Dr. Shitu made something very salient about architecture and the art itself. There's not just about art for the sake of art, but utilitarian art. Like the same that Dr. Teriba spoke about. It was one of his works that was used as a concept for the Smithsonian Museum of African Americans, long after the man has passed away. So, and that's a very good example of when the works begin to live beyond the creator. So any other question before we, can we get BC Olumide on? Okay, now some of the comments I can get in here. Okay, Oluwa Toyin Superson says, Professor Ojuade, thank you for the expose on the multidisciplinary nature of architecture. I was at the Drum Festival last year and was opportune to meet the professionals behind the scene. What is the setup? Sadly, no architect was involved. How do we get architects to open up to work with other creative fields in preserving our cultural heritage. Professor Ojuade, please.
Thank you, Oluwatoyin Shobeson. Actually, as the discussion was going on, while Dr. Shitu was talking, I sent in a question, or not a question really, that probably can there be a working relationship between architecture and theater profession? I think if we can have a working relationship, a kind of partnership, it will open up a lot of things. I appreciate what Dr. Shitu showed us now. And I think I've seen some of those things in the northern part of Nigeria. If we can collaborate and say, okay, there's going to be a performance, we now bring in experts, not necessarily the performing artists alone. If we invite an architect, definitely it will drive us to a contemporary way of doing things. They are experts, they know what to do. And if we continue to do it the way we do it, it's just like a miniature of, of what they are doing. It won't be the original. So I don't know if you can consider what I said, that can there be a kind of working relationship, at least at professional level? Yes, sir. Dr. Teriba, yeah.
I just want to agree. I want to echo what you said. I think we have to reconceive of the architectural practice. Again, to my points about the design process, I think we can, again, as we get commissions, just like how Dr. Shito has told, I think the very process by which architects design, if we have a project, just making it very concrete, if we have a kind of project, why don't we design the team for that project from the get-go, from the onset, from the beginning, and say that, okay, what artisans can I use? What performers, if it is a theatrical space, what directors, what dramatists can I invite from the beginning, even before I put pen to paper, before I put pencil to paper? So in other words, I think we have to redesign the way that we design, that we should also, as we x-ray, as we look at the brief, we should also look at our own practices and say, what practice, what design practice will work for this particular project? I just wanted to echo what you were saying. I wanted to support what you were saying.
Now, okay. We need to get the understanding that this is just a starting point. This discourse is a starting point for us to begin to do more of that collaboration. Also, I was at that.
Sorry, Dr. Shitu.
Drum festival also.
Okay.
On invitation of Professor Ojuade last year, and I thoroughly enjoyed myself with the level of ornamentation and the performing arts that was on display. Now, there's one of the questions that's okay. Dr. Shitu has a comment.
Yeah.
Dr. Shitu.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate what the two presenters just said. We architects, we don't have to wait for big commissioning. What I want us architects to understand is that every project, no matter how small it is, we should see it as an opportunity to showcase ourselves.
I like that.
We should be ruthless in our belief. If I'm to design, if I get the same commission I get today, if I to get the same commission, I will not do the same design. because the client will be different. I may not be fortunate to get a design that is ready to experiment, but I should be able to design something that is beautiful, that is ornamented within that limit. It could be just tiles in the kitchen and toilets. So it doesn't have to be, have all those sculptures and whatsoever. No. It has to be very simple, but we must be stubborn in our belief. We should be able to, we should put money secondary. And finally, I want to say one thing. One thing that my boss told me when I was having those nightmares, he said, look, he said, opportunity in life comes when you least expected it. This is your opportunity. And believe me, he was right. That project defined me, made me who I am today. So every project, we should take it as an opportunity for us to bring in new ideas. Let's be stubborn as artists. Artists don't paint two things, one painting twice. Why should we continue to repeat the same design all over? And there is one, before I go, there is one, Darren. He said, why are we not seeing this kind of buildings around? The one I showed. There are many. In Kaduna alone, before I left Nigeria in 2006, before I left, I think I have more than 10 schools, projects. But you know what? The clients won't allow anybody to go in there because they so much cherish it. They don't want anybody. This, I mean, if you go to Essence today, they won't allow you to take a photograph of the school. The person I send has to call me, and I have to speak with the person that manages. Not only speak, we have to video conference to make sure that I'm the person she was speaking with. Okay, so they are here and there. For example, if you notice very well, all the pictures I show is the exterior. The interior is as decorative as the interior. Or I could not show the interior based on the client's listen. They said no. And truly because most of the pictures have children in it. So I cannot show that. If I have to show that, that means I have to get the consent of those children. And I'm talking of 20 years. Now, most of those children, their parents probably are no longer in Kaduna and so on and so forth. So that's why I limit all my work to that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shitu.
Okay.
Okay, I want to have comments from Architect Toyin Jogbesu.
Architect Jada. I want to say big thank you to the big trio, so I will say it. Dr. Shitu, thank you for being our Francis Kere for Nigeria, and you stand the gap for the so many people that are doing Francis Kere's work. I'm actually dancing where I am. As in, I don't know what to say, I'm excited. So thank you. Thank you, Dr. Teriba, for pointing that out, that our schools, our curriculums need to be changed. It's not for tomorrow, it's for now. And thank you, Professor, because you showed us that we can work with different art fields and different creative industry, different professionals to bring out what architecture really is. Architecture is art, architecture is culture, architecture is our heritage. And enough of the cut and paste, shovel and paste, and all about construction. So today I want to say thank you because you've made us know that architecture is about research, research and more research, trial, errors, and improvement. I just want to, Dr. Shitu has answered one of the questions because I was saying, can we take our students of architecture to see this and see that it is possible? That's one. Then the second part is, I liked the part where he said, considering the Islamic culture or the Muslims or the Northern culture, that they don't do ornamentation on human forms or figures and stuff. And the connotation again within Africans thinking everything that's got to do with ornamentation or culture is related to shrines. How do we get our value system to start changing? That's two. Three, I know this conversation goes on after this. We hope to be able to call all of you again and have this discussion even further. Thank you.
Okay.
Dr. Jagere.
I can see. Okay, Dr. Teriba, you answer, but before you do that, there's a question from Architect Bisolumide.
Thank you, Architect Jagere. Dr. Teriba, thank you. Yes, can you hear me now? Dr. Teriba?
Yes.
All right. Dr. Teriba, thank you very much for your presentation. And to Dr. Shitu as well as Professor Oluwade, thank you very much. It's a good learning experience. I just want to say something regarding what you said, Dr. Teriba. Now, I want to mention the issue of patronage. Dr. Shitu mentioned it. He mentioned the issues he had with his client. And I want to ask, I'm wondering why Demas Nwoko was able to experiment with his architecture. And a lot of what he has done is religious architecture at a time when the clients might not necessarily have been as exposed as today, but he was able to do his work and present something totally indigenous in his way of thinking compared to what we have nowadays. I also want to, my opinion is that the new religion or the adoption of religion today with the Pentecostalism and the modes of worship and the adherence to certain ways of thinking regarding ornamentation, especially traditional ornamentation, and that it appears to connote to many people the concept of fetishness or fetish practices. Could that be a reason why ornamentation, especially our traditional ornamentation, is abhorred nowadays? Again, I'd like to take on what you mentioned about the educational system and the fact that we seem to be promoting the concept of glossy two-dimensional or even three-dimensional virtual presentations as opposed to practicality. And that's why the adoption and grading of works which are done in the international style, the modern style, the minimalist style, appears to be graded better for students' works than work that has any element of the traditional. Traditional not necessarily being anything that connotes idolatry or fetishism, but it's just traditional. So I just want to consider those things. Thank you.
Can we have Dr. Teriba to respond to both?
Thank you very much. Very excellent points. It reminded me, so just I'll make this very brief. Professor Aradion of Unilag, I remember hearing just an anecdote many years ago, 120 years ago, where he tried to get clients to enable him design buildings with Adobe and with Earth. And not many people wanted to engage him. They saw Earth and Adobe as being something that was traditional, fine to the village. It was only one fellow professor now who actually engaged him. So I do think, in addition to what you said about Pentecostalism and this idea that those, that ornaments may be fetishistic, I think there's another element of the fact, and I alluded to this on Tuesday, that we are so psychologically, we're so indoctrinated with modernity, with minimalism. We talk about minimalism. I think that even beyond the religious elements, I think that most people have, they're not, most people in whether, just in a modern society, they have a skeptical look towards ornaments. What Dr. Shitu said about how when ornament is infectious, because once it started on that project and the client could see, then he got on board. I think that has something to do with it. But I also wanted to say that your comments were just so wonderful that there were so many ideas that were just sparking off in my head. And I'm trying to remember what. But I think there's this idea we have to, yes, okay, what you said about Demas Nwoko, that why it reminds me, Demas Nwoko actually submitted a design for the National Theatre in Igomo, and he was rejected. And that was, and the reason why I say that is because a lot of demonstration projects have been either private, a cultural center somewhere within or what have you, but most of his projects have been private. So he's had autonomous control. But whereas with public projects, with the National Theatre, it was rejected. He planned a design that would have been much more Afrocentric than what we have right now in Ugomu. So he's not entirely been successful. So I think part of it too, our culture must change. You know, we have this modern minimalist. Most people, this is a wonderful discussion, but most architects are not having this discussion in Nigeria. You know, we have to change our minds. We have to, you know, change our minds in terms of our appreciation of ornaments. I would argue we don't admire ornamentation enough.
Thank you. And before Dr. Shitu comes on, the other part of that question, talking about when people see some of those native ornaments and begin to add them to religious and whatnot, I want to just make this comment that most of those ornaments were ahead of those, even those cults and religion. Most of the time, they look at a particular insignia, a motif that is established within the people, and they now begin to allude it to their own use. So, and that is one of what we are trying to do in this conference, for us to unveil the meaning behind the form. So it's not see when you see a particular sign, it means this particular cultism or whatever. Most of the time they begin to use them, and people seeing it year in, year out, allude them or as seeing it as an emblem or sign for that particular group. So the reason why we are here is for us to begin to look for the meaning behind the forms, and we'll get there. Dr. Shitu.
Oh, Architect Jagede, I will charge you for plagiarism because you just stole what I wanted to say.
We are in the same school.
So I think what we need to do, is this. We start, look at creating stories behind those ornamentation. Have a common ground to say, look, this is, yes, this has, they use it for Shushra and this and that, but however you can use it for this and that. Architect Jagede in his presentation on Monday gave an example of Hagia Sophia that was formerly a basilica, then mosque, and now it's a museum. It's the same building. So why can't ornament that is synonymous to maybe traditional religion that is no longer in practice, why can't we reform it, adapt it to modern context? So I think my own thing is that we architects have to start thinking. We have to start talking. Enough of these 3-4 pages of A3 drawings. We have limited architecture to nothing.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Shitu.
Yeah.
Now, on the note in which you ended this, I want to make a comment as we round up. The comment is, some few years back, before this AutoCAD and CAD design took over, there are lots of people do presentation on CAD, but you remember how we do it. We don't limit ourselves to the X and Y coordinates alone. We use the cardboard and freely express our mind. And I think even in the curriculum, as much as the student is going on the card, we still need to allow expression in other forms, in sculpture, expression, even of painting on canvas, which are part of what we were trained with. Now, I want us to join this same conversation next week, Tuesday. We'll be going further and deeper. Oh, Dr. Shitu, okay, let me have you. I'll tell you about. Let me just 30 seconds each.
Okay. Okay.
Dr. Shitu.
Okay. So my colleague that joined us from Canada said, why can't we introduce traditional architecture in Nigerian university curriculum. I think some universities are doing that. And based on that, me and some other colleagues here in the UK, and the same person that asked the questions, we are organizing a series of seminars starting from November on sustainable and low carbon buildings that are adaptable to Nigeria. So that's why I just want to announce to this audience. So I will liaise with architect Jagede on this, and then so that we all join. Thank you.
That would be a good one. Thank you. Professor Teriba.
So just very quickly.
30 seconds, please.
Learn the technology of the artisans and create your own ornament. We don't have to imitate the past, but learn the tech. This Olaware of the said did this behind me. Find artisans like him. Learn the technology and create your own ornament. That will let you.
Thank you. Thank you so very much, Dr. Teriba. We were so excited to be part of this conversation. Then from the visual performance angle, Professor Jelil Ojuade, we're highly excited the way you made us understand that as in poetry, so is in architecture. Thanks so very much. Now, also, Dr. Tofiloshitu, you brought the pragmatic and the practical end to the discourse. Now, these are things that have been done from 1995. So it's such a good one that over 20 years ago it was done. You could do better. So it's not as if we are doing something new. We're just trying to excite us to do what we can do and begin to bring out the ingenious and the ingenuity within us. Now, next week we'll be going further in this discourse. And the title of our discussion next week is Reimagining the Soul of Our City.
Imagine soul of our city.
Have we lost him?
Probably. Probably. I'm still hearing you. Probably we'll finish with the chat.
Wow.
Well, it was exciting. At least we're able to round up.
Yes. Is it back?
Not yet, sir.
Okay.